Hello and welcome to the first of my informal panel discussions entitled Just Thinking Aloud, with me, Dr. Gregory Chamberlain. On this
Oopsie.
On this occasion I am joined by Dr. Mervyn Skylar of the Institute of Self-Personal Development, based in the United States.
Hi.
Dr. Skylar is visiting the United Kingdom as part of a sensationally successful pan-European roster of lectures
It's been a sellout.
and has graciously found time to join me today to discuss the war on terror, among other recent global developments arising since the infamous 9/11 terrorist attacks.
Dreadful thing. Just awful.
Agreed. Dr. Skylar, I wonder if we could begin by clarifying that your academy, the Institute of Self-Personal Development, was inaugurated in May of 2016.
That's correct.
While mine, the Institute of Self-Personal Growth, was established in March, over a month earlier.
So you tell me.
It was.
It's an incredible coincidence, Gregory. But like they say, great minds...
What?
Great minds, they think alike?
I'd like to start, if I may, by recounting as anecdote a conversation I overheard in my local public house, the Cross Threads, less than a fortnight ago.
Sure, shoot.
What I overheard was a discussion regarding recent global conflicts framed in the by now widespread and popular opinion that these are either justifiable in terms of an assault against dangerous terrorist organizations, or as an attempt to seize control of the oil in those areas affected. I thought it might be interesting to use this popular discussion point as a framing device for our own discussion
Now,
as we...
I don't want to derail your little show straight off the bat, Gregory, and believe me, I'm a big fan of your UK cricket, but I was hoping we could start from a more sophisticated position.
But this is the popular view, the zeitgeist.
Who exactly was having this discussion, Gregory?
Is that important?
I'm just curious.
Well, let me see. It was Misery Stan and Tommy Bollocks.
Oh, is that his real name?
No, he's just not very cheerful. I think his real name is Stanley Hollingsworth.
Right, gotcha.
So, ideological tension or oil?
I'm not really comfortable with such a reductionist
Oh, sorry. I'm busy, Cynthia.
I just wanted to let you know I'm back from buying eggs and...
Hi there.
Oh, hello. Sorry,
And who might you be, little lady?
This is Cynthia, my landlady.
Cynthia. What a lovely name. Cynthia, could I possibly impose upon your hospitality and relieve myself?
Oh, well, this is very sudden. I don't...
The toilet, Cynthia.
Oh, yes, of course. Down the stairs, on the left. Just push the dog off the seat.
Much obliged. And I love your accent.
Who's he?
That is Dr. Mervyn Skylar of the Institute of Self-Personal Development.
That's your thing, isn't it?
Mine's personal growth.
Oh, he seems very nice. Very. Is he?
American? Yes.
Well, he seems very, very nice.
Cynthia, did you want something?
I'm worried about Jason.
Well, Jason is dealing with some physical symptoms of... He's not well and...
No, I'm worried he's going to be staying here indefinitely. When's he moving out? I'm not really comfortable having a murderer in the house.
Cynthia! Shh! We talked about this. We need to...
How long is he staying, Gregory?
A little longer. Not too long. He just needs to get well again and...
Thank you, Cynthia.
We need to get on, Cynthia.
Oh, okay. I'll get on then.
So, we were about to investigate the popular argument that recent conflicts were justifiable as
Now,
either...
just hold your horses, Gregory. As I was saying, I'm not really comfortable with such a reductionist view. I think maybe we need to take a leaf from Julia Kristeva's Desire in Language here.
Sorry, who?
Julia Kristeva?
I don't think I've had the pleasure.
She's a French feminist.
Oh, well, that'll explain it. I don't speak French. Do please go on.
Je vous remercie. Without straying too far from the agenda of our little chat, and admittedly I'm simplifying for brevity, it could be argued that we, as people, are drawn to the idea of binary opposition as a consequence of the way we've constructed our language. Just as concepts like light, up, right, and woman are opposites of dark, down, wrong, and man, we're inclined to consider all arguments as being one thing or the other. In this case, as you say, terrorism or oil.
Yes, but...
In reality, however, there's often a third option, hidden in the grey area, and I'd argue that the majority of people, the zeitgeist as you call them, people like Misery Stan and Tommy Bollocks in the Cross Threads, tend to gloss over this possibility in favour of a simple either-or dichotomy.
But if we look at oil...
Let me finish. It's interesting to me that the only linguistic concept that doesn't have a readily available opposite is justice. All we have in opposition to that concept is injustice, which is a little like countering light with unlight, or man with unwoman. The opposite of justice just doesn't seem to have a concept all its own, or so it seems to me.
Surely that's just semantics.
Precisely.
Moving on...
To conclude, I think the absence of a firm opposition to the concept of justice is contributory to the difficulties the zeitgeist is having justifying recent events to themselves. In my new book, Gregory, I wonder if now might be a good time for me to notify your listeners that my new book, Legacy of Lies, Future Histories Will Be Woven from Discourses of Deception and Agendas of Attrition, is now available online at my website store. That's www.instituteofselfpersonaldevelopment.com, and will cost the UK readership 25 of your sterling pounds and 99 pence, excluding postage and packing.
You've had another book published.
Sure I do. And this one's a doozy. Here, I got you a copy, free of charge. And I signed it too, see? To my UK counterpart.
Oh, that's very thoughtful. Here, have a cap. It's got the Institute of Self-Personal Growth logo on it.
Fantastic. What do you think?
It suits you.
No, the book.
Oh, yes, well done. Moving on... Putting aside the zeitgeist for the moment...
A good move, I think.
I'd like to propose an alternative launch point for our discussion.
All for
it is an equally popular and entrenched belief that history repeats itself and...
No occurrence is sole or solitary.
I beg your pardon?
Mark Twain, no occurrence is sole or solitary, but is merely a repetition of a thing that has happened before.
Indeed.
And perhaps often. The Jumping Frog, 1865.
Very good. So we agree. History repeats itself.
People have been thinking that since time immemorial. No reason we can't do the same.
So, we have a launch we both agree on.
Absolutely. This is a concept I find fascinating, and is something I cover in depth in my new book.
Is it?
Yes, it is. You see, I believe it's prudent when seeking to understand the present to consider how any given time will be viewed 100 years after the event.
That's an interesting thought experiment. Would you care to share your views on how future historians will view our time?
Sure. I predict that our time, viewed from 100 years into the future, will be remembered loosely as the time of digital revolution. A time when technological innovation and mass infrastructural reconstruction changed the world and fundamental human interaction on a global scale.
A fair assumption. This would be very much in line with how we view the period roughly 100 years ago, as...
The Industrial Revolution.
Precisely. Yes, I think I agree. But how does that explain...
What looking at now from the vantage of a hypothesized, albeit largely inevitable future gives us is a perception of our time as a future history, and a view of our time more readily accessible for analogous comparison to the history we already know.
What? I'm sorry?
If we view now as history, we can more reliably compare it to history.
Oh, I see. Oh, excuse me.
Sure.
What is it, Cynthia?
Jason wants to know if you got his French fries.
What? Oh, yes, his Frenchies. They're in my drag bag, Cynthia.
Why didn't you say they'll be cold for him? I can't find them.
Root around, Cynthia. I'm busy.
I can't find them.
Would you like any help?
They're in a little
A
bag.
McDonald's
A
bag.
clear plastic bag.
Had they run out of holders?
I didn't get them from McDonald's, Cynthia. I got them from Joe in the Cross Threads.
Since when has Joe done food? Why didn't you go to McDonald's on the high street?
It's not what you...
There's a little bag of blue pills.
Yes, that's it.
Well, these aren't chips, are they?
No, they're, laxatives.
Then why'd he say French fries?
It's slang, Cynthia. Young person street jive.
What, like rhyming slang?
Yes.
Well, go on then. How does that work?
French fries, clench eyes.
Huh?
Clench eyes, Cynthia. It's what you do when you're straining, isn't it?
Oh, I see. Very good. Is he very constipated, Gregory?
I imagine so, if he's sending me out for laxatives.
Is that why he's moaning and groaning in his room?
Yes. Yes, that works.
I was going to ask him if he wanted anything to eat.
Very thoughtful, Cynthia. I'm sure he'd
I was
appreciate...
going to make omelettes, but if he's already bound up, What about a chili?
You mean like the one you made last week?
Yes.
An eminently suitable choice.
Do you want any?
God, no.
Would you like some Mervyn?
Don't.
No, I'm good, thank you.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll get on then.
Thank you, Cynthia.
And give Jason his laxatives.
That's great, thank you.
Have we got plenty of toilet rolls?
Yes, plenty.
Oh, okay then. Well...
So, we've managed to establish as our launch point that history...
Gregory, was that a bag of amphetamine?
Shh. Cynthia doesn't know. Jason's trying to kick a bad cheesecake habit.
Right. Say no more. Jean Danette, you pastry goddess, you'll be the death of me.
A brief recap, then. History repeats itself, and 100 years from now, historians will most likely view our time, the digital revolution, in much the same way as we view the Industrial Revolution roughly 100 years in the past. So, oil. Would you agree that the United
States... The thing about the Industrial Revolution is that it was a period that defined the world as we now know it, or rather, the three worlds as we now know them.
You're referring to the First, Second, and Third Worlds.
Precisely. The inception of the last century occurred at a time when old empires still had the capacity to marshal the dissemination of new technologies across the globe. They were the nations whose innovations and invention provided new technology.
The First World, yes, and those who were franchised to benefit from
the Second World, and then those who were denied
in order to curtail their development to the point that they were forced to sell the resources they owned that were
required to maintain the new world. Exactly.
So the legacy of the Industrial Revolution could be said to be a divided world.
I'd say that was indisputable. With the digital revolution, that mechanism wasn't in place, but something needed to be done to maintain the existing dynamic.
So oil was used...
It was necessary to avert the possibility of leapfrogging.
Leapfrogging.
The risk of a previously underdeveloped nation getting ahead of the game as a result of instating new technologies ahead of the pack. You see, the First and Second Worlds had infrastructures to update. Miles and miles of copper wire to be untangled from around our stalwart sewer systems before they could be replaced by fiber optics. The Third World had nothing to replace. They could have installed in a matter of decades. I mean, look at what's been achieved in the UAE with the right allies and permissions.
The UAE?
The United Arab Emirates. 20 years ago, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, places like that were nothing more than a few hotels and a post office in the desert. Now, well, arguably among the most cutting-edge places in the world.
So, the war on terror
Those nations that could have leapfrogged needed to be delayed, and the way you do that is to tie up their time and money with something else, and a justification for doing so that the rest of the world could really, what's that?
I told Jason no smoking in the house.
Are you sure that's all that is?
Come on, the house is on fire.
What?
A kidney bean exploded in the chili and the sparks set alight to the chip fat on the curtains. I've called the fire brigade, but we need to get out. The smoke's already reached the guest bedroom.
Have you told Jason?
Jason jumped out a window as soon as I mentioned the emergency services.
Is there a clear route of exit, Cynthia?
We can get out the back, but we might need to climb over a pram.
What about Lombroso?
I already let him into the yard. He went straight to the outside toilet. He'll be asleep in there, I reckon. Come on!
Mervyn, grab the laptop.
Sure.
We'll carry on somewhere else. I'll take the microphone. Hello and welcome back to the first of my informal discussions entitled Just Thinking Aloud. Unfortunately, we have been forced to relocate due to unforeseen circumstances back at...
We're like evacuees.
Indeed. As a result, we have secured permission to continue here in my local public house, the Cross Threads, and I have been asked by the acting landlady Jo to mention that... there is a happy hour here with a limited range of cocktails and alco pops available at the very generous rate of 3 for 1 between 2:30 and 2:50 in the afternoon every second Wednesday of the month, excluding December and January and August. As you can hear, my special guest Dr Mervyn Skylar of the Institute of Self-Personal Development is still with me.
Hi.
But we have also now been joined by local patron Stanley Hollingsworth and Tommy,
All right.
just Tommy then. They are joining us here because the other table has a bowl on it to catch drips from the ruptured water pipe in the ceiling. Dr. Skylar, Before we were forced to move, you had begun to share your belief that the war on terror was part of a coordinated effort to curtail the development of third world countries in order to allow the first and second worlds to update their infrastructures in readiness to exploit new technologies.
No, I was suggesting that by viewing the present as a future history, and by comparing it to the pre-established histories, the suggestion carries some merit, hypothetically.
So you don't think that?
As I state in my new book, I think it's a plausible hypothesis, and it's not one that's difficult to arrive at if you consider all that's happening in the world. Taking it to the extreme, you could even assert that the regulations imposed on industry in the name of strategic environmental assessment are just another way of holding back the development of poorer nations.
That's a stretch. I don't see anything wrong with caring for the environment.
Who possibly could? But why does it need to be so expensive and complicated?
Not wrong with the environment, just overschooled snobs causing waves, tree-hugging hippie twats.
That just may well be the case, Stanley. But can we ever be certain? It's just bloody Europe flexing its muscles, bloody foreigners.
Most of those initiatives came from the UK, Tommy.
Aye, from career bureaucrats looking to make good in Brussels. You can't pull the wool over my eyes, fucking jumped up fuckers.
What we need's a revolution.
And we might have had one and all if it weren't not for the football, sex and alcohol.
Watching the match, down the hatch, home for the snatch.
Cheers.
Cheers. Oh dear.
I'm beginning to like the zeitgeist, Gregory. Earthy. Smashing. Another misery. I think I'll get some cheesecake.
Returning then to the subject in hand,
Sure.
If we entertain your hypothesis, we have to consider that the war on terror was an attempt to clear space for technological improvement.
That's the theory. As I said, you prevent leapfrogging by tying up underdeveloped nations' time and money elsewhere. A bombardment under the guise of a just strike against terrorism is one way. Refusing to relieve nations of debt was another.
The GA summit never stood a chance, Geldof or no.
Meanwhile, we were encouraged to embrace satellite TV and mobile phones, launching everything up into the stratosphere with placeholder technologies to tide us over while the real overhaul took place back on Earth. Mobile phones. Bloody kids don't know they're born. I think the problem is they do, Stanley. They know all too well. Entitled twats. There you go, Stan.
Aye, cheers.
I'm nipping out back with my cheesecake.
Maui wowie.
Gregory, why do they have to take the cheesecake outside?
Crumbs.
But the floor's so sticky, it's like wading through treacle in here, and Joe's worried about a few crumbs?
She doesn't like cleaning.
Clearly. And what's the smell?
Disgusting. So, according to our hypothesis, the First World used oil
I think oil is part of it, sure. But it's not as simple as purely seizing control of resources. It was more about complicating revenue streams to non-first world nations.
Money, you see. Always money. Long as they've got cash on it, they couldn't give a bleeding monkey's about anyone else. That's really outside our remit, Stan.
Is it?
I'd really rather we limit our discussion to...
I think Stanley has a point, Gregory.
Always keeping little man down. Don't matter if it's class at home or them starving kiddies we see on news.
Interesting. But who, Stan? Who's coordinating all this?
Oh, you're not going to mention the Illuminati, are you?
No, of course not.
Well, that's a relief.
They've got snipers everywhere, Gregory. I'm not stupid.
Oh, for Christ's sake.
Illuminati. Just another way of saying ruling class.
And who exactly do you believe this ruling class are?
Big business, innit? Your corporations and conglomerates.
Interest.
Politicians are just there to keep the people happy. Puppet show. To create the illusion of democracy. If you like, it's all business nowadays. All about money. Stanley, could I interest you in reading my new book?
Aye, I'll have a gander.
Superb. It's just £25.99.
Oh, no then.
Ah.
Could we please possibly get back to the discussion? I have a lot of research to cover regarding the global oil industry.
Put the oil industries on hold, Gregory. I think Stanley has hit on a pivotal point here.
Oh, whatever.
We've come full circle. We're back at the Industrial Revolution. You see...
Tommy's back. Tommy, good cheesecake then.
Aye, champion. Tommy, what's wrong with your eyes?
Sugar rush, doctor.
Really? Your pupils are enormous.
Talking of full circle, you were about to return us to the Industrial Revolution?
Yes, thank you. As well as marking a time of global division, the Industrial Revolution is also notable as a time of world-changing ideological shifts. With the publication of Charles Darwin's On the Origin of Species, we saw a dramatic turning away from the old theological explanations for mankind's origins, and the embracing of the notion of a slow evolutionary rise. While it could be said that this revelation's announcement at a time when mankind was also tentatively discovering technologies that would allow them to manipulate and control its environment, effectively allowing us to opt out of evolution at the very time it was beginning feeling to be understood was ironic. There is no disputing that authority regarding mankind's origins moved from the previously theological assertions of religion to the new empirical assertions of science, and mankind began to become slave not to God, but to nature and the environment itself. Add to this the contemporaneous reformation in the United Kingdom and the clearing away of the rotten boroughs, and it's clear that a new regime was beginning to bunker in. Real power has never belonged to the politicians, but has instead smoothly transitioned from the hands of the church to the new technocrats we see today, via the rise of the bourgeois nouveau riche created from industry. Now, the old theologies work alongside the new order in all but one instance: Islam. And, while marshalling the dissemination of new technologies across the globe, the war on terror has served the additional purpose of destabilizing the last of the world's governing religions to facilitate the continued march of capitalism throughout the world.
Sorry, jukebox is playing up.
Oh, we're enjoying that.
Love a bit of Holtz, mate.
Well, thank you, Mervyn. Thank you very much. Thank you for spoiling my first panel discussion.
Twatting Gregory. Spoiling? I assure you that was not my intent.
We're almost out of time, and I've covered none of my research into the oil industry, and we've hardly even touched on 911.
It's, 9/11, Gregory, is it? Blimey, one for the road, misery.
I'd like you to leave, Mervyn.
Could I at least just give the URL for my online store again, so your listeners can buy my book? It's www.
What's the point? You've talked about it so much, no one needs to read it.
Gregory, I am well aware that you've been trying to steer this discussion toward the matter of oil and have made several attempts to engage me with the idea that my home, the United States of America, is solely responsible as orchestrators of some kind of drive for coca-colonization. But I suggest you look a little closer to home, mate.
Ah, there you are.
Cynthia, how nice to see you.
How are things back at the house, Cynthia?
The fire brigade's gone. The cornices need a wipe round and the kitchen curtains are ruined, but the smoke's gone and they say it's okay to go back now. Will you be long?
We were just finishing, actually, Cynthia. Mervyn was about to leave.
Oh, I was hoping he might be staying over.
I'm afraid not, Cynthia. No.
But I've set a camp bed up in the pantry and I've been out to buy...
Is that an Ann Summers bag, Cynthia?
It's an old one.
Look, Cynthia, it's very thoughtful of you to go to so much trouble, but my publisher already arranged a hotel room for me tonight, and...
Oh, okay.
To be honest, I'm not feeling too well.
Oh dear, I get that abroad too. Would you like a clench eye? That'll clear the pipes.
Clench eye? What's a clench eye?
Is it like a fury?
What's a fury?
A really tight hand job.
Oh God, Mervyn, no. Don't use your hands, you'll do yourself an injury.
Oh, for pity's sake.
Cynthia, I'd love to stay, but I'm afraid your sitting tenant has revealed himself to be a very misguided and ill-informed doctor indeed.
You listen to me, Johnny Fingers. This is a kind and committed man doing his best to help others find the gateway to a better reality or whatever. A lot of it goes over my head, but I think it's time you left.
Could we at least close with the US national anthem, ironically, as we agree?
No.
What's that you keep doing with your fingers?
What? This?
Yes, what's all that about?
It's parenthesis, Cynthia. Little quote marks for emphasis.
It's distracting. You look like the Punch and Judy man.
Oh, I love your UK humour.
Yeah, humour's spelt with a U.
Sure it is.
2 U's. You can see yourself out.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for having me. It's...
Ah.
Thank you, Cynthia.